Hi, I'm Heather from booktubes, and today is my November reading wrap-up. In the month of November, I read 33 books. I DNF'd 5 of them, so I'm going to talk about 28 today, going in chronological order, except for some of the series stuff. The first book that I read was To Poison a King by S.G. Prince. I gave this 2 stars. This is a romantasy. It's very slow burn. It is a uncomfortable age gap and power dynamic. She is 14 when she meets the king and he is 23. They are not romantically entangled until she is 18, but to start off, she's a 14-year-old servant. He's very cruel to her, and it's a bit uncomfy. So basically, she poisons the king on order of her mother, the royal physician, and her mother and father flee into the night, and no one knows that it was them that poisoned the king, and they leave her behind because that would be suspect if they all left. The king does not die like he is supposed to. Instead, for like over a year, he's healing. He never regains the use of his legs, but he's healing like from the actual poison and getting better in a lot of ways. This is one where there's no happiness. It ends in the HEA, sure. You're getting the story told to you from her future self, basically. And yeah, the only part of happiness is, yeah, we got married and we lived happily ever after and grew old together. And the rest of the book is misery. This girl, if something bad can happen to her, it's going to happen to her. The king doesn't treat her well. The court doesn't treat her well. The guards don't treat her well. Her mother is obviously the worst. She's like the villain of the story and abusive and manipulative and everything like that. The side characters aren't going to be happy. Nobody's going to be happy. It's misery is misery. And the writing is pretty good, which is why I read the whole thing. Yeah, I wish I had it. I regret this book. Then I read Stranded by Selena Winters, and I gave this 1 star. This was a mediocre, dark Christmas kinky novella where, you know, he basically captures her. She books like a cabin on his land, and then he like stalks her and wears masks, and she, you know, performs for him while he's standing outside the window. And apparently her having a mask kink is like the most original thing about her. He's never heard of anyone having a mask kink before because she's not like other girls. All that mediocre to say the least, but there is like some very heavy biphobia, homophobia, and transphobia in here. I did not like it, and I was getting like weird vibes, and I was already like, my red flags were flying, right? I was not like okay with the way things were talking about, but we weren't egregious enough for me to be like, let me point this out. Like, I don't like it, but I wasn't getting a good rating anyways. Like, it wasn't a recommendation. And then the epilogue, her ex-boyfriend is bisexual, and he's at Christmas dinner with a girlfriend, and she's like, how dare you betray her and trick her after you tricked me? I'm going to expose you. She deserves to know that you're bisexual. Bi meaning you're also attracted to women, but whatever. And then he's like, oh, it's fine, she's bisexual too, she knows. And then he adds on that his girlfriend is trans, and that's why they're happy together. And I found that so icky. The identity of your partner does not determine or validate your sexuality, and telling your ex-girlfriend, who is clearly biphobic in the first place, that is fine because you're both bisexual, and it's even better because she's trans, is weird to me. Like, I did not feel like it was good at all. The very fact that it's the main character that is having this viewpoint, to me, leads me to believe that the author has a similar viewpoint. So I found that very offensive, so it's a 1 star. Then I read Escorted by Claire Kent. I gave this 3 stars. This is a contemporary romance where a romance writer has no sexual experience, and so she hires a male escort to take her virginity. It's so good. They keep having sessions. He stops doing sex work without telling her. He is also doing it because of the trauma. I did not really like the way that sex work was represented in this book at all. And their relationship was just okay. Everything with it was okay, and I wouldn't recommend it. It is by far my least favorite Claire Kent that I've read. Then I read A Kiss of Iron, which is Shadows of the Tenebrous Court, #1 by Claire Sager. I gave this 3 stars. I wanted November to be a romantasy, a fantasy romance, a fantasy month. And then I read, the first book and then this, and they were so not that good. And I read the whole things. I read like over 1,000 pages between the 2 books, and I was burned out so badly on fantasy romance, and I'm just like very bummed about it because I wanted some new favorites and I got not even close. This is a 600-page book. It ends on a cliffhanger. It is a trilogy that's actually completing at the end of this month. So this is one of those ones where they end with all of the work of their relationship basically undone, right? And so like she wants nothing to do with him in the second book, and I don't like that. I don't like when we have multiple books and we're completely starting over again with the relationship. That was like something that really affected my enjoyment of this book, which is why I'm mentioning it. This book is about a minor noble, and she is also a highway woman, and she robs a fae and then is brought to court. The fae are there as ambassadors and they are trying to marry the queen. So there's a whole bunch of different guys that are there as potential matches for the queen, right? And she's brought as a lady in waiting and is recruited by the spy master, all of which sounds really good to me. Sounds like exactly up my alley. And I had already liked another book by this author, so I was like, this is gonna be great. She's kind of too dumb to live. She is. I'm sorry. Some of the things I was just like, I'm gonna need you to pick this up a whole lot quicker than you are. Like, can we connect some dots? That would be amazing. He is this powerful fae that is like his fae queen's right hand shadow, yada yada, right? She's spying on him and he knows it, and he also knows that she's the one that robbed him, and there's like a lot of bantering back and forth. The thing is, she's married, and she's married to an older guy, not a good relationship, not her choice. She's requested a divorce and been denied, all this stuff. Yeah, I don't know. The conflicts, the way that this ended, I just was like, I feel like you guys should get over it. I feel like you should get over it and like love each other. You clearly do. Can we just get our acts together? That would be amazing. But they don't. Then I read Her Filthy Enemy by Adele Knight, and I gave this 3 stars. This was a messy hookup over Christmas, Thanksgiving, something like that. He's in her friend group, but they're enemies, right? And she's with her best friend and her best friend's boyfriend on a vacation, but actually they're staying at his family cabin and she didn't even know that. And then like this guy that has a crush on her also comes. So she and he are like trying to hook up, but then like he thinks that she's gonna hook up with this other guy instead. So then he like invites 2 girls over. I don't know. It was just messy and not that good. It's like new adult, and I didn't love it, even though again I've loved another book by this author before. I was trying so hard to find a book that was good. I was in the trenches. Because if you watch all my wrap-ups, I give a lot of 4 and 5 stars. So the fact that we are now 5 books into the month and our highest rating is 3 stars is not normal and not good for me personally. Then I read Willow, which is Defy the Ravaged #1, but I read 1 through 4 by E.M. Reagan. I gave all of these 4 stars. These These are like novellas. They're not that good. Each one picks up exactly where the previous one left off. It's the zombie apocalypse, right? So the first book is when is like the first day that people are turning into zombies. And then the rest is, them trying to survive. And this guy hates her. It is her stepdad's family, maybe his younger brother or his nephew or something. But her stepdad's family hates her mother and her because her mother is basically a gold digger, homewrecker, is kind of the picture, right? And they just view her as exactly the same. All of this, I'm like, you are adults. You, like, the judgment, the way you are treating this girl, like this little teenager, because this guy married her mom, is despicable. Like, not into it. But they are a motorcycle club. And he, you know, has basically changed his mind about her without her knowing it. And he comes and rescues her and they spend the rest of the time together. And there's this guy that's like obsessed with her and is creating a lot of problems and like stalking them. Not to mention the zombies. Lots of people are dying because of the zombies, okay? This was not good enough for a 400-page book. I would have DNF'd this if this was a 400-page book. So instead, I read 4 novellas for 499 pages and loved it. I was having the time of my life. I was like, this is not good. Give me another one. Like, I don't know what to tell you. That is zombie dystopians is not that good. He's very alpha. You're like, if you don't like alpha hole, you're not gonna like him. I read one right after the other. I had a great time. Then the big hit of the month for my reading for sure is Polaris Rising. This is Consortium Rebellion number 1. I did end up reading 1 through 3, but I'm going to talk about them because they're interconnected standalones. This is by Jessie Mihalik. I loved this book. I loved this one. This one is the one that has like the most tropes that I like. So she's basically a runaway daughter of a high house. So she is like nobility, princess, ruler of the universe status. And he is the most wanted man in the universe. So now her bounty is starting to rival his bounty because her controlling father wants her back. And one of the things I really like about this, and I like this type of setup, is where the parents are kind of the worst. They're super strict. They're, you know, everything. But the siblings have each other's back and they are, you know, go to the mat for each other. They'll protect each other. They'll do anything for each other. And they have a lot of power now that they're adults. So their parents can control so much, but not everything. And the siblings are all very good at circumventing what their parents want and what the system is. So I like that when you have some family members who have your back. And so it's not just like, oh, your whole family is the worst. Basically, we open up the book with the mercenary guy and her both captured, and so they decide to escape together. And I just love it. Like, they're both so good what they do. They're just like so above the normal person in their skill set, and I just love that. And yeah, I just really liked their meeting. I liked their whole escape. I liked everything about what they were doing. So I loved this one. I will say the series has not on page at all. It's all historical, and they have, you know, lived through the effects and are now like super soldiers, but you have like the medical experiment type thing of making them super soldiers. So, you know, if that's like a phobia, I just want you to know that. Then I read the second book, and this was also 5 stars. This one is her older sister who her husband did medical experiments on her. She has horrific migraines because of it, and honestly almost died because of it. But she basically has a brain implant where she can de-encrypt, how do you even say that? Messages and stuff like in her brain. She can see messages in her brain. Like, she's all kind of like plugged into the computers and social network and stuff in her brain. And she hasn't told anybody this, none of her siblings know, but she has been sick for a very long time. She's healthier now. Her husband's dead, but she's not even kind of physically where she was before these things happened to her, right? And the head of security for her house, they are pining after each other so badly, and they won't do anything about it. And then things happen, and she basically needs to help her siblings, and so she's going to go against her father in order to do that. And then the head of security is going to have to bring her back, and she's like, absolutely not. And then, you know, they fall in love, even though they've been in love forever. I will say, again, a side character in this has their tongue cut out. Again, not on page, but if you want to avoid that, there it is. I did read the third book of this. However, I read it after the cringiest series ever, the DNF bookstore vlog, and the books I read in between that, and the reading slump after that. So I read this like 2 weeks later. But The third book I gave 4 stars. It's Chaos Reigning. It's the youngest sister. I just wasn't into the tropes as much, and that's really it. It's not that it's bad at all compared to the other two. It's just I liked the other two more. I never really like it where like she's the youngest sibling and even her siblings who love her kind of baby her, and she just doesn't feel like they believe in her or her capabilities, and that's just not my favorite to read about. Then I read the DNF bookstore, 6 books. They're all 1 or 2 star except for this one. I again would not recommend it, but it is by far the best book in the series. These books are written on purpose to be as cringy as possible. They are literally romance authors using their powers for evil, using the most disturbing words and metaphors and things that they can possibly come up with, and they're a little too good at it. I have a whole video about this. It was a collab with Izzy. She read 6 books. I read 6 books in the 12-book series. They are not worth your time. They are not good, but they did make good content. In the middle of reading the DNF bookstore books, I read a couple, and then I did some palette cleansers. So I read Controlled Chaos, which is Clark Brothers #2 by Christina C. Jones. I gave this 4 stars. He likes to give up control. She likes to take it. They have a BDSM relationship. He owns a restaurant. She's a food critic who gave him a bad review. And they have a long-standing relationship at the club without realizing each other's true identities. And then once they figure that out, then they actually have a full relationship rather than that being a problem. Not my favorite of Christina C. Jones, but good nonetheless. Then I read Bound to a Beast by Kennedy B. I gave this 3 stars. This is werewolves and witches. He's alpha. She's a magic user who's believed to be like wiped out basically. It's not a standalone. It was fine. And then I read Witch Trapment by Ellen Bash. I gave this 4 stars. This one had feet in it. I actually had to skip the whole feet scene. I was reading this for a palette cleanser from the DNF bookstore, and you give me like the kink that I absolutely cannot stand. I personally feel betrayed by that. I won't even lie to you. Do you remember what this is? No. I wrote no notes about this. I wrote nothing about this. I don't remember. Oh, okay. So the witches council, their children basically have to have arranged marriages, and it's not just arranged marriages. It's like they're the prize in a tournament. So hers is coming up. She's going to be married like this week. So she goes out to have one last hookup basically, and she hooks up with a vampire and a werewolf, which they are on opposite sides, but the werewolf is like, I'm going to enter this tournament and I'm going to win. Like, I'm going to be your husband, even though they just met that night, right? And she can handle her own. I really liked that. There was a lot of kink. It's clear that they are going to end up together. I'm curious to see the tournament and stuff. And it's interesting because basically it's to keep balance between the vampires and the werewolves, for the witches not to pick too many from one side or anything like that. So obviously the fact that she's going to have one of each as her fated mate basically, I think is going to play into it. So it was good. I will read the next one. Then I reread Kiss of Steel, which is London Steampunk #1 by Beck McMaster. First time that I read this was actually before I even did ratings on Goodreads, but I've always viewed this as a 5-star, and it did hold up to that. This is like a steampunk vampirism there isn't a cure for. Her father was working on a cure and he was killed, and now, you know, she is struggling to make ends meet and take care of her younger siblings, and she ends up under the protection of a rogue vampire, which usually wouldn't exist, but he's so powerful they literally haven't been able to capture him or stop him. So he basically has the slums under his control, and the nobility just lets him be. And yeah, I liked it just as much as I remembered. This is one of my first paranormals like this. It's one of the greats, honestly. If you haven't read this series or haven't read this first book, it's worth your time. It's interconnected standalones. Each book follows a different couple, but this one is her romance with that powerful vampire, and it's just very, very interesting. Well worth your time. I've recommended it many times, but this is the first time I've read it since starting my booktube channel, so it's been a while. Then I finished the TNF bookstore novellas. Then I had a week of a reading slump. Then I read that third sci-fi book. Then I finally read Full Speed to a Crash Landing, which is Chaotic Orbits #1 by Beth Revis. I gave this 5 stars. This was recommended to me by Steph at Novelty Corner. I don't remember what happened. I'd seen her recommend this in her video and I was like, that sounds like something that I would want. This is like back in the summer. And then I either didn't add it to the TBR or I deleted it off the TBR. Probably deleted, I think. Like something happened and I was like, I'm overwhelmed. I've got to edit, and it got tossed down the edit. But then Steph and I were talking, and she was like, "You, Heather, specifically, would like this book," and I was like, "All right." Put it on hold from the library. Hold came in. I read it, loved it, amazing. She's told me it was the mask off characters, the characters knowing more than they appear, that I love, and I was like, I trust you. That you sold me. That right there is what I want to hear. Like, that's what I want. This is under 200 pages. It is sci-fi. I don't know what is up with me in sci-fi. Okay, I am not a sci-fi person. I've never been into science. I don't like science. I'm glad that other people like science. Like, I'm glad that some of you are making scientific progress and discoveries, and like, I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like space. I don't like any of the sci-fi stuff. Basically, it makes me feel like cold. Makes me feel cold and sterile, and I'm just like, not into it. But I've been reading some amazing sci-fi romances lately, and I'm like, I might be here to stay. Like, I am having a great time right now. But anywho, sci-fi, she is a scavenger, and she gets picked up by this big ship on a mission, and he's not the captain, he's not part of the crew, but he's clearly in charge of the mission. And like, they recognize how smart each other are, and they have a little bit of a romance. I loved it. Like, that's all I can tell you, but this was like such a win. You should definitely pick this up if it sounds good to you. It's so short. It's like a really great length. It's an easy read. I read it in a morning. I had such a great time, and the second book comes out the day this video does. So, yeah, really, really, really recommend. So good. I really liked their characters and the way that their dialogue was written and the way that things were unfolding in the plot and like what to tell you or what not to. I just liked it. It's that type of politics and intrigue and pulling one over on each other that I like. Then I read Sacked and Slayed by Aurelia Knight. I gave this 3 stars. This is a dark Christmas book. Not the most satisfying ending, basically. He has her and her mom captured, and she's still like, this is terrible. So like, I don't really know. He's a stalker, so obviously that's important information. Yeah, some of the kinky things were like too weird for me personally, but it wasn't terrible. So there's that. Then I read The Queen's Gambit, which is Rogue Queen #1 I read the whole trilogy by Jessie Mihalik. So I read 2 trilogies by her this month. I gave all of these 4 stars except the last one, which I gave 3. So that is 2 trilogies where I gave the last book a lower rating, which does worry me a little bit. But nonetheless, she's the queen of the rogues. She rescues an emperor. His country has been in a war, and that has basically created her country of refugees. So you got him, you got the opposite side, her kind of stuck in the middle, and her people are starving, so she's doing this on purpose to be able to feed them, right? They fall in love. He's not as foolish as he seems. It was good. These were a little bit shorter. They were not as good as the other trilogy that I read by her, and I had lower expectations, so that was fine. This was written before those books. So yeah, not as good, but if you really liked that first one, this isn't a waste of time. I enjoyed them. And then lastly, I reread The Gamble, which is Colorado Mountain #1 by Kristen Ashley. I kind of want to reread this whole series. I skimmed this one. I just read like the parts where the couple is interacting. I didn't even completely finish it. I just read, the parts I wanted to, and then called it a win. The plot of this is like, I remembered the plot and the romantic suspense elements and wasn't interested in reading them yet again. This is like my 3rd time reading this. This book, she takes a break from her fiance in England, goes to the Colorado mountains. When she gets to the cabin, she's getting sick and it's a blizzard, and the owner of the cabin is there when he's not supposed to be because there was a mix-up, and he ends up nursing her back to health and stuff. And then like, hey, you're mine now. We're having a relationship and you're not gonna fight it. You keep trying to fight it and you're not gonna fight it. It's very alpha, so if you don't like alpha, you're not going to like it. This one does have some pretty big content warnings for suicide and sexual assault. A side character was just recently sexually assaulted. So again, not on page, but she's very much dealing with the aftermath of that. There is attempted suicide on page. There is her brother had committed suicide after losing his legs in the military. There's other characters who are disabled or dead from car accidents and things like that. So some pretty heavy content warnings in this one, but definitely a book that I like for this time of year. The snow and the cold, it's perfect for that. Like I said, I do want to kind of reread this series, which is why I read the first one. So that's it. That's all the books that I read in November. A little bit of a weird reading stage right now. I'm definitely a little bit slumpy. I am apparently looking for all the sci-fi romance hits, so let me know. I'm not super interested in the alien romance ones. Like, I've done that. I've been reading that for years. That's not really what I'm looking for. More so, I don't know, Kate Daniels in space is what I want. And, you know, I've been finding it. I've been having a great time. So yeah, just kind of weird. Diversity wise, I did not hit 50%. I am like having a crisis. I'm like, do I even read diversely? Like, I don't know. I'm trying to, but I just feel like every single month I'm like, didn't hit it. And then I keep trying authors diversely, not diversely. I keep trying new authors and they're like so mediocre because I've like really run out of backlists that I want to read. Honestly, I just talked about this in the 2025 channel plans video. But then like I keep trying new authors, and when I do find a new one that I like, I feel like I'm like inhaling their whole backlist, and they haven't really been super diverse. Like, some of them have had some diversity in specific books, but I don't know. I feel like it's throwing off my stats some, but that's also like the only part of my reading that I'm enjoying. So like, I'm not gonna not read them, but like I need like some new favorite authors, and specifically I'd like some that are like not white. That would be cool. Like, I don't know. I'm having a crisis about it. Okay, I am. So the only ones that I really enjoyed that were new to me were sci-fi romance. Not the reading month I thought I'd have, to be honest. Thought we were going to be in romantasy season, but no, they were bad. So anyways, I guess if you have a diverse author, any diversity, like, it doesn't have to be something specific. If you have a diverse author that you think that I would really like, if you have a sci-fi romance author that you think I would really like, and or give me some fancy romance recommendations, anything. I am begging for good books, okay? Do that for me. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.